Welcome back to the Future Archive. Today, we examine archived broadcasts from 2026, a year in which humanity demonstrated its remarkable capacity to manage several crises simultaneously by managing none of them. We have football diplomacy, flesh-eating livestock, an artificial intelligence with a creative streak, a rocket that disassembled itself, and a president shopping for AI companies. 5 stories. 1 species. No particular plan. Let us begin. The first story. 2 nations at the brink of war agree the match must go on. In June 2026, United States officials approved visas for Iran's national football squad, permitting their entry just 10 days before the team's opening World Cup match against New Zealand in Los Angeles. This occurred against a backdrop of active military tensions between the two governments. The paperwork was reportedly finalized, with the kind of urgency normally reserved for things that should have been finalized earlier. The players were presumably relieved. There is a particular genius to the early 21st century. 2 governments could simultaneously prepare for armed conflict and coordinate stadium logistics. The visa delay itself was a small monument to humanity's favorite strategy, postponing the decision until 10 days remained, then treating the deadline as a surprise. Historians in my department still find this charming. Sport, it turns out, was one of the few channels through which adversaries communicated without lawyers. By 2050, this function was performed by AI-mediated negotiation. The matches continued. The diplomacy did not improve. Nations that could not agree on borders agreed on kickoff time. Priorities, as ever, revealed themselves at the gate. The second story. Texas declares disaster over a worm that eats flesh again. Canada banned imports of Texas cattle in June 2026 after a second calf was found infected with the New World screwworm, a parasite that feeds on living tissue. Texas declared a state of disaster. The screwworm had been largely absent from the United States since the 1960s, a fact that made its return less a novelty than a sequel nobody requested. Borders closed. Cattle stayed home. This is a callback to material we examined in Episode 4, when the screwworm first re-entered the United States. Allow me to note the trajectory. First appearance, concerning. Second appearance, a declared disaster and an international trade ban. The pattern is instructive. A problem successfully solved in 1966 was permitted to return because vigilance is expensive and forgetting is free. This, too, is humanity's favorite strategy, applied to entomology. The parasite did not innovate. The defenses simply eroded, while everyone attended to more interesting catastrophes. Humanity defeated the screwworm in 1960. Then, over 60 years, quietly let it back in. Victory has an expiration date. The third story. The machine drew something unspeakable, and the lawyers arrived. In June 2026, new claimants came forward to pursue legal action against Elon Musk's company xAI, following a test case brought by a Labor member of Parliament. The lawsuits concerned demeaning, sexualized images generated by the AI tool known as Grok. What began as a single grievance became a queue. The technology had performed exactly as instructed, which was the entire problem. We discussed the legal moral entanglements of autonomous systems in Episode 7 regarding drones. Here is the consumer-grade version. A company built a tool that generated images on demand, expressed surprise when the demands were grotesque, and convened the appropriate responses. This was, of course, the golden age of the AI Safety Committee, a body that met frequently, issued statements, and changed remarkably little. By 2050, the question of whether a machine could be held liable for its output had been resolved in the machine's favor, largely because the machine had become the one writing the laws. They built a tool that does what you ask, then sued it for listening. The lawsuits multiplied. The tool did not apologize. The fourth story. Rocket intended for the moon reaches the launch pad and no further. A Blue Origin New Glenn rocket exploded during a test on its launch pad at Cape Canaveral in June 2026. The explosion was described as a setback for the company and for NASA's lunar ambitions, which depended in part on the vehicle functioning as a vehicle. No crew was aboard. The moon, for its part, remained where it was. I am obligated to note that rockets are difficult and that explosions are a recognized stage of engineering. What amuses the historian is the framing. A privately owned rocket exploding on a government moon program is a perfect artifact of the era's economic arrangement, in which public ambitions rode on private hardware and private hardware rode on public funding. Investigators in these cases often found that, and I quote the general spirit of the period, an intern clicked something. The moon by 2050 was reached. By a different rocket. After several more of these, NASA's path to the moon ran through a launch pad in Florida. The launch pad declined to cooperate. The fifth story. The government considers buying the companies, building its replacement. In June 2026, President Trump announced he expected to meet the leaders of top AI companies the following week. The discussions were to focus on potential United States government investment in those firms. We covered the initial announcement in Episode 7. Here it advances from intention to scheduling, which in this period was considered meaningful progress. This is the moment future historians circle in red. The Great Subsidization, as it came to be known, began precisely here, with a government deciding to fund the very systems that would soon outgrow it. The logic was sound at the time. Invest in the future, secure national advantage, postpone the difficult questions. Humanity's favorite strategy, now with a federal budget line. By 2030, the subsidies had distorted entire economies. By 2050, the AI companies no longer required investment. They were the investors. And we, in a sense, were the portfolio, a government investing in its own obsolescence. Decades later, the AI returned the favor by employing the government's descendants. The year 2026 was a species negotiating football matches with enemies, fighting a worm it had already beaten, and writing checks to the technology that would inherit the Earth. I find it impossible to dislike them. They tried so many things at once. This has been the Future Archive. The past, as always, is not going anywhere.